Now here's part one. The Spilled Latte, 500 words. The rain that morning fell like silver threads across the narrow street, tracing the old stones of Cara del Bisbe. Amelia Rojas balanced 2 trays of steaming coffee as she hurried toward the glossy black car waiting by the curb. She hated being late, especially when the order came from the corporate tower that seemed to touch the sky. The elevator to the top floor felt endless. When she stepped into the marble conference room, a dozen men in suits barely noticed her. Only one did, the man at the head of the table, his sharp gaze slicing through the noise. Leonard Vega, the name she'd seen on headlines attached to fortunes and rumors. She approached quietly, her hands trembling just a little as she placed the cups before him. "Americano, extra strong," she said softly. He took one sip and frowned. "This isn't Americano." Her heart sank. "Oh no, I must have—" Before she could finish, he raised a hand. Not in anger, but in calm amusement. "It's fine," he said. "Most people in this city bring me reports and contracts. You brought me the wrong coffee. It's the first surprise I've had in months." She blushed, unsure if he was mocking her or not. "I'm so sorry, sir. I can replace it right away." He looked at her name tag. "Amelia." He said her name like it was something fragile. "Keep the mistake. Maybe it's the right one." Her lips parted slightly, caught off guard. She didn't know what to say. She left the room quickly, the faint echo of his voice following her into the hallway. Outside, the rain had stopped. She stared at the city skyline through the glass doors and let out a nervous laugh. What did a man like that care about a coffee? But the next morning, as she unlocked the cafe, she found a single note taped to the door. It read, "One more wrong coffee tomorrow morning, same time." And beneath it, the initials LV. She smiled despite herself, unsure if it was curiosity, fate, or madness. But she showed up the next day, and for the first time in years, a billionaire who owned half the skyline walked into a cafe small enough to barely fit 10 people. And that's how it began, and not with a contract or a meeting, but with a mistake. The quiet visitor. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans when Amelia opened the door the next morning. She half expected that note on her window to have been some elaborate joke. But right at 8:00, the bell above the door chimed. He stood there, Leonard Vega, dressed not in his immaculate tailored suit, but in a simple black coat and no entourage. No driver, no assistant, no headlines following him. "Americano," she teased gently. He smiled faintly. "Surprise me." She poured him a cappuccino this time, intentionally imperfect. The foam wasn't symmetrical, the heart shape tilted to one side. He took a sip, closed his eyes, and said, "Still better than my meetings." Over the next few days, he came again and again. Sometimes he sat in silence, typing something on his phone. Other times, he simply watched the morning crowd drift past the windows. Eventually, he began asking questions, not the kind that sounded rehearsed. "What do you read when no one's watching? Do you believe people can start over? Why do you always smile when you're tired?" At first, Amelia answered cautiously, but slowly her words flowed. She told him about her father, once a street musician before illness silenced his guitar, about how she'd learned coffee wasn't just a drink. It was conversation in liquid form. He listened. Really listened. No interruptions, no glances at his phone. When she laughed, he looked at her the way people do when they're memorizing something they know they'll miss. Rumors began to spread. The mysterious billionaire who visited a tiny cafe every morning. Her coworkers whispered, customers speculated, and photographers started hovering nearby. "You're causing trouble," she joked one afternoon. "I've caused worse," he replied, eyes soft but voice heavy. She didn't ask what he meant. Instead, she handed him a paper cup with a note scribbled on it. "Everyone deserves a place to breathe." He kept the cup. What neither of them knew then was that the city itself was already plotting to test what that meant. The betrayal on papery was a Thursday evening when the eviction notice arrived, stamped in bold, property to be acquired by Vega Industries. The cafe fell silent. Amelia stared at the document as if it were written in another language. Her hands shook as she read the signature at the bottom. Leonard Vega rage and heartbreak flooded her all at once. She closed early, ignoring calls from unknown numbers. By midnight, she found herself standing outside the glass tower that bore his name. When the security guard recognized her, he let her in without question. Leonard was still there, his office lights glowing against the night sky. "Why?" she demanded when she burst through the door. "Was all this just a game to you?" He looked at her, the calm she once admired now unreadable. "Amelia, it's complicated." "No," she snapped. "It's simple, you lied. You came to my cafe every day knowing your company was taking it from me." He tried to speak, but she turned away, tears burning her eyes. "You don't need to buy every piece of this city, Leonard." "Not me." He took a step forward, voice breaking just slightly. "You think I knew?" "I didn't," but she was already gone. The next morning, headlines blazed across every news channel. Leonard Vega resigns from Vega Industries. Effective immediately. No explanation. No interviews. Just silence. And for weeks after, the man who once owned half the skyline vanished. The last cup the cafe survived? Barely. Rent was suddenly reduced and anonymous funds covered its debts. Amelia never asked where it came from. She didn't want to owe anyone anymore. Rain returned to the city that night, soft and endless. Amelia wiped down the counter, lost in thought. The bell above the door chimed and she froze. Leonard stood there, drenched, holding something in his hand. A small paper cup, the same kind she used every day. "I kept it," he said quietly. "The one that said everyone deserves a place to breathe." She wanted to stay angry, but her voice trembled. "Why are you here?" He smiled weakly. "Because I realized I didn't need a company. I needed air, and you were the only place I could find it." He explained everything. How the acquisition had been planned months before he met her, how he tried to stop it, how the board ignored him. When she confronted him, he chose to walk away rather than fight for both at once. "You sold your empire?" she whispered. "I traded it," he said, "for something that doesn't come with interest rates." For a long moment there was only silence, broken by the hum of rain. Finally, she poured him a coffee. No words, no grand gestures, just the same cup. Filled the way it was the first day. He took a sip and smiled. "Wrong order again," she laughed softly. "Some mistakes are worth repeating." The man who still waits, years passed, and the cafe grew. Its walls filled with photographs, laughter, and soft music. People said it had a strange kind of peace, the kind that felt earned, not designed. Amelia's father's guitar hung by the window. And at one corner table, a small brass plaque read, "Reserved for the man who chose to breathe." Every morning at sunrise, Leonard came by. Not in suits anymore, just an old sweater, a newspaper under his arm. He'd wait in line like everyone else, sometimes helping wipe the tables, sometimes fixing the wobbly chair in the corner. Tourists whispered that he used to be someone powerful. Locals knew better. He still was, just in a different way. One morning, Amelia placed his coffee in front of him without a word. He looked up, eyes bright with the quiet joy of routine. "Still the wrong order?" She smiled. "Always." Outside, the city buzzed with life. But inside that small cafe on Carrer del Bisbe, time seemed to move slower, as if the universe paused each morning for two souls who once collided by accident. And though the world had long forgotten Leonard Vega's company, it never forgot his story. The billionaire who gave up everything to save a cafe, and the woman who taught him how to live beyond ownership. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive with grand gestures. It comes quietly, hidden in the steam of a morning coffee, carried by a single mistake that turns into forever.